my visa to come to the United States. Doesn't end here. So then what happened was that every home that I came to, for my the interviews that I had to take for my residency training, happened to be Sai devotees. So I ended up going to the Bethesda Sai Center, so it would be kind of in a part of the singing. Of course, at that time, I did not know Sai bhajans, so ended up just kind of, enjoying the ambience, the bliss of kind of just the singing that people would so beautifully kind of, sing, both the lead singers as well as the chorus singers. So that kind of, got us into the Sai fold, clearly in the early 90s is what I'm talking about here. Then, of course, my parents ended up coming to the United States, and I had moved from New York City to Connecticut by then. And Connecticut, even though in hindsight had a large Sai center, the Sinclairs were in the Connecticut. And so to me, we never ended up going to the Sai center there. So we just did bhajans at home. So we learned bhajans. At that time, we used to have the Sundaram cassettes. And so we just heard those cassettes, not the CD and the MP3s. We used to have those audio cassettes. And so we just kind of, learned from Sundaram, Sai bhajans, and ended up kind of just doing this every Sunday. We learned the Sai Ashtotram, bhajans, and then Arati. So this happened to be our routine. Then subsequently, I moved to the state of South Carolina. And this was the late 90s, around 1999. And I happened to come to a retreat. So there is a connection to Atlanta. So I happened to come to a retreat, Sai retreat, in the year 1999. And at that retreat, happened to have two distinguished speakers, Dr. Hyman Johnson and Dr. Chaudhry Voletti. For those of you who remember, Dr. Johnson kind of clearly was a part of the Education for Human Values project. And Dr. Voletti, as you know, many, many years later, got to be the director of the Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Medical Sciences in Prashantigram. So those two had spoken, and I was truly kind of taken by what they had got to say about what Swami had done. So I went in and approached Dr. Johnson and said, I'm truly kind of taken by the Education for Human Values. So we had a conversation, and during that conversation, he asked me, Meera, what do you do? I said, I'm a physician. He said, you should be working in either the medical camp or at the general hospital in Puttaparthi. So I kind of, chatted with him. He said, give me your email address and let me try to make the connection. So of course, I went back to South Carolina and wasn't very sure. I'm sure kind of he must be inundated with the request that he had gone on to receive that day. Wasn't expecting anything, but very promptly on that Monday, he connects me to the medical director of the Global Medical Camp at that time. And so they asked me how many days I was planning to spend in Puttaparthi. I've never been to Puttaparthi, so I have absolutely no clue what to expect. I'm like, 2 days. They said, no, the medical camp is for a week. So you've got to be committed to spending a week there. So I said, fine. I had not been to India in almost 5 years. And so this was a great opportunity for me to kind of course, connect with family, but also go in and experience Prashanti Nilayam. So here we end up reaching Prashanti Nilayam on November 19th, 1999. Okay? There's a reason for that. So again, here we are on Ladies' Day. There's all these connections that God makes. What I did not realize was that 16 years later, on Swami's 90th birthday, I would be speaking at Prashanti Nilayam on Ladies' Day. And that is kind of clearly the Lord, He has our entire life planned. So why do we have to worry about anything? My second trip subsequent to that was in July of 2000, year 2000. So this was, again, during Guru Purnima. So most of the medical camps were held during Guru Purnima and during Swami's birthday. So second camp, I go in and, of course, during the medical camp, everybody gets the opportunity to, if at all, to sit in front. right? You are the kind of at the lead of the row. And so I got to sit there, and Swami comes so beautifully from his residence, and you can literally see him kind of glide past kind of you. And there is a lady sitting next to me who tries to get Swami's attention, and she says, "Swami, please bless my daughter-in-law," who was sitting behind her. This lady was sitting right next to me. So Swami comes in, stands before me, waves his hand, materializes vibhuti, and starts to give it to me. And I'm like, I haven't asked for it, and I'm not going to put out my hand if I haven't asked for something. So the Sevadals were like, trying to force my hands, like, vibhuti is profusely kind of coming from Swami's hands. This was the first time I had witnessed a miracle. And it was so real. So I put out my hand and, of course, got the vibhuti. The lady also got some vibhuti. And I was so excited. During those times, we didn't have cell phones, right, that you can connect. My parents were in the US. So I went to an STD booth in Prashanti Nilayam, and I called them up and said, this is what happened. On the second trip, it's like I get vibhutis from Swami. So now, slowly, kind of the divinity, kind of, the enormity sinking in. Same trip, Guru Purnima day. So just prior to that, a number of my colleagues, physicians, were also getting these padukas. There happened to be these paduka festivals over the years. And so some of them already had padukas, and some of them were getting padukas. And I, just thought about it. I said, wouldn't that be a nice transitional object for me to bring with me when I come to the US and keep it in my prayer room, so when I'm not in Parthi. So I happened to go in and get a pair of padukas, and my sister, who very many of you might know, is from the Raleigh Sai Center. She happened to, I think, have her baby, her child was about a year old, so I knew that she wouldn't be able to go serve in the medical camp. So I said, let me get another pair of padukas for my sister. So during that time, they would allow padukas and other things to be brought into Sai Kulwant Hall. So we were, I was elated. It is Guru Purnima, kind of had, bought a new sari, had the padukas wrapped in this beautiful red-colored silk cloth, kind of took it in. Again, happened to get the first seat. Doesn't happen that often because there's so many, right? So I end up sitting in front. One of my friends happened to, Sai sisters, happened to hold on to the other set of padukas that my sister had, that I had bought for my sister. So Swami comes, and this time around, Swami is not on my side of the line, he's on the other side. Right? So he just walks way past. I could literally see him leave, and I had made up my mind. It's like just holding those padukas is blessings enough. As soon as I had that thought, from wherever he was, diagonally he starts moving towards where I was sitting. Comes in, puts both of his hands on the padukas that I was holding on to. And that to me was, if, what else can I get while Swami is kind of doing this? So my thought was, I should give this set of padukas to my sister because I had experienced it, right? She was not there to experience it. I should give it to her. The minute I had that thought, Swami moved forward. My friend was sitting in the third line. He reached forward, and that set of padukas that she was holding on to, he blessed that set of padukas too. And that is when I realized that God can literally read your every thought. And so those two were probably turning points of my life. For me, as a woman in science, as a neuroscientist, as a psychiatrist, these kinds of incidents kind of, have become just normal. And we now call them Sai incidences, right? It just happens. We've seen the hand of God in every act, in every moment. Having Swami as Guru and as God to steer me through this ocean of existence has been the greatest blessing for me. Now, subsequent to that, I'd been attending medical camps for quite some time until about 2004. At that time, I moved to the university, and of course, life got the better of me, or at least that's the reason I gave myself. Got to be busy. We were a part of the young adult group in Columbia. I know Brother Ravi kind of had visited us during that time. wherein we were a part of Habitat for Humanity, other projects that we undertook. And as we were I was getting more and more immersed in reading more about Swami, I truly began to appreciate the enormity of the social care projects that Swami clearly spearheaded, whether it was Narayana Seva, right? Feeding the poor, service to humanity is service to God. And here was, so Manava Seva is Madhava Seva is what Swami says. But when I saw at Hillview Stadium, Swami serving the needy, here was Madhava serving Manava. So he's truly been an exemplar of how to lead a life. And when Swami says something, he leads by example. And we've seen it time and again. So again, got to see the social care aspects of it, even Grama Seva for that matter. When you look at Grama Seva, how did Swami do this? Swami didn't go to a village and say, well, let me start off by giving you health care, or let me start off by giving you education. He knew what was the basic necessity: food, right? Clothing. So we started off by providing food first, then provision of clothing, and then subsequently other things followed: maternal child health, other things. So I think those were important elements of social care that I began to appreciate. Subsequent to that, again, as an educator, I also looked at some of the deemed institutions that Swami has set up. Whether I know there are many sisters from Anantapur here, as well as the Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. Clearly, education builds character, is what Swami says. To me, that was very important as an academician, to be able to take a look at that rounded experience that people were getting at some of these institutions. In addition, it was what also clearly attracted me to what Swami said was basic human values, incorporating that into your lives. As a physician, to me, that is so very important. When you serve as a physician, you need to have those inculcated into the way in which you provide service: compassion, respect, dignity with which you treat your patients. Those are and love, so very important. So you can see even what was happening, just me looking at some of what Swami had been doing via literature, had been able to start drawing me towards the Sai fold more so. What I liked about Swami is that he walked the talk. And there are leaders who just talk the talk, but here was a leader who had walked the talk. Swami truly personified the 5 values. And again, when he talks about these 5 values of Satya, Dharma, Shanti, Prema, these are values that are cornerstones of daily living. And it's not just, we come in during SSC and talk about, Satya. We've got to make sure we practice the truth, speaking the truth. And that's an important thing to be incorporated into our daily lives. In addition, I think what was also important for me was the fact the Sai ideal healthcare. I've always believed that people should get universal healthcare, free healthcare, loving healthcare, comprehensive healthcare. I'm a psychiatrist, right? The mind, body, spirit connectivity is so very important. You just can't cleave the mind away from the rest of the body. That was an important element. And then, of course, preventative healthcare. So each one of what Swami had been talking about, or the tenets that he'd been laying out, were so very important in what I was doing as a physician, as a human being as well. So things started to gel, and I started to it's just like, Swami pulling each one of us, like Shirdi Sai, they talk about the sparrows being drawn. Very similar. Each one of us has our own path that the good Lord determines, and we start to get drawn towards him. Now, we also know when Swami had the Medicare projects, it was not just medical camps, but also setting up of the general hospital, right, both in Whitefield as well as in Prashanti Nilayam, as well as the super specialty hospital. So I remember very vividly when I was, the first time that I was traveling to Prashanti Nilayam, 1999, November 19th, I look at this as we are traveling. I look at this beautiful temple of healing. I was amazed. I mean, if those of you who have seen the, clearly super specialty hospital, I was totally in admiration and awe of what I saw. Never had the opportunity to visit the super specialty hospital. I would go to the medical camp, do my stuff, and I'm out of there. So we hadn't been to the medical camp, as I said, after 2004. There was a hiatus of about 10 years. 2014, I kind of got drawn back to being a part of the camp. So this was after Swami's Mahasamadhi. So despite the fact that Swami was not there in his physical form, I still felt kind of, clearly the vibrations. And so I told my parents, next time we go there, you should all come. So this happened in December of 2014, early 2015, January of 2015, we were there. And somebody told me, hey, if you happen to be in Prashanti Nilayam during sports meet, you should definitely go. So once that desire is kind of instilled in your heart, I'm like, I really want to be there during sports meet. But of course, it's going to be, it's going to be very packed and it's going to be very busy during that time. So I had this thought. And then I had a call from the then medical director of the Satya Sai Institute of Higher Medical Sciences, who happened to be Dr. Chaudhary Volati. I did not know. Again, we had never met during the retreat. So he calls me up and says, Meera, we would like you to do a presentation at the super specialty hospital. So now I had a reason to go. Happened to be exactly during sports meet. So I happened to witness sports meet and end up going to present at the super specialty hospital. Now, I'm like, this was pre-Ladies' Day, so I have never spoken in Prashanti Nilayam. And the amount of anxiety that I had, I'm like, here I am speaking in front of this distinguished group of people who are all a part of the Sai family, who have been under the guidance of Swami, proximity, nearness and dearness. So I get there, Dr. Volati introduces me. I, take Swami's blessings, get up to the podium. The podium is still here, okay? So Dr. Volati is a tall man, I am not. So now I'm like, I like to see my audience, just to get a sense of the response. And so I'm like, what do I do now? So I had to be very quick, kind of think on my feet here. And what I did was I stood on my toes. No pun intended. Quick thinking on my feet, standing on my toes. Stood on my toes for the entire 1.5 hours. So I'm here, you've heard about Geeta Ram's story about the stool, right? That she kind of, she's short. So here I was, I didn't have the guts to ask anybody for a stool. So I was like, I've just got to improvise. So I said a mental prayer to Swami. I said, I'm kind of, I've got to do it. You got to take care. And so I had not an ounce of exhaustion on my 2 great toes. So that energy came from somewhere, obviously from him. I also need to pause here and say, I am not somebody who is public speaking is never my forte. So here was Swami kind of getting me to speak to such a large audience of folks, and there were probably a little over 100 people. It was packed, standing room only at Super Specialty. Here I'm reminded of what Swami told Phyllis Crystal, just to instill that confidence in her, got to speak up. So kind of again, Swami puts you in these positions to see, kind of develop that innate talent that people might have. And he truly guides you through all of this. At that time, I did not realize that that was a dress rehearsal for November 19th, 2015, Ladies' Day. So again, when Swami plans something, he has it to a T, immaculate planning. So during that trip on November 19th, 2015, which was Swami's 90th birthday. We happened to stay till Swami's birthday in the morning session, and then it was, I think, Kavita Krishnamurti and L. Subramaniam performed beautifully that day. And we were planning to go to Bangalore the next day. So, of course, it would be very tedious for my parents. So we just said we'll go back to Bangalore and then rest for the night and then get to Bangalore. So a number of my friends said, oh, you've come this far, you've come to, your father's house, Swami's home, and you are leaving kind of without staying for the evening event, there was a grand event at the Hillview Stadium that they had planned. I felt bad, but then of course we had these plans in place. So I just asked for my forgiveness to the Lord. We kind of headed back to Bangalore. As we were heading to Bangalore, there are these winding roads. So the weather was very, ominous skies, and it was going to rain significantly. We reached the hotel. So we were at this place, it's a temple there, Kukke Subramanya. So we reached the hotel, get into our room, and the electricity. So my mom she likes to, fiddle with the remote. TV remote. She likes to watch something on TV. So she was trying to do that. Electricity went off. So, of course, as hotels do in India, they started the UPS. And what was interesting is that whatever my mom was doing with the remote, whichever channel she had on, obviously we didn't know at that time, what came was Jaya TV. On that we had Ustad Zakir Hussain performing live from Prashanti Nilayam, and then we had the bhajan boys, Ravi and Ame and everybody singing. I did not miss anything. So it was like, we were kind of front row seats. I'm sitting in kind of the hotel and just watching it on TV. So that's kind of what Swami, when you have that yearning, when you have that connect, he just makes sure that you don't miss any part of it. Now, when I talked about me not being a kind of, public speaker, me speaking at Sai events started off in 2012. And around, I think, early part of 2012, there was a speaker who very many of you might know, Mr. Rommel, who might have come to the Sai centers here, as well as he's been a part of retreats and other events across the globe. He happened to come to, I think, Charlotte Sai Center, and he happened to spend the night with us. Just overnight, kind of just talking about Swami. We were planning, the end of 2012, we were planning to go to Bali, Indonesia. And I knew that there were a number of Sai centers in Bali. So I really wanted to visit one of the Sai centers there. And I tried to look up the Sai.org kind of website just to get a sense of, are there people that I can contact and say, where exactly in Bali is it located? I tried and tried, didn't succeed. There wasn't any email address, there wasn't any contact number. So I reached out to Mr. Rommel and said, of course, via email, and said, this is what it is, and I really want to go visit. Within 30 minutes, there was a connection made via email to the president of the Indonesia Sai Center, telling them about how great a speaker I am. I'm like, I've never spoken at any of the Sai events. And to me, it was like, oh my goodness, it's like this. I didn't know how to take it. He was very kind, and the kind email that he sent. So I said, after that, it was, I think many of them were at another event, which was also happening in Indonesia. So they were busy so there was a lapse of about several days, no response there. So it was time for us to leave. And by that time, we had received a response connecting me to the folks at Denpasar, which is the capital. So we end up going to Bali. We are there, we had been doing a lot of sightseeing. We played phone tag with this gentleman who happened to be our contact at the Denpasar Sai Center. Finally, we connected on a Tuesday around 4:35, and he says, well, we hold bhajans at the Sai Center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Would you be willing to come today? I said it was short notice today, but we'd love to come on Thursday. So I said, great, I'll come and pick you all up. So I said, you don't have to do that. I'll take a car and come. He said, no, no, we really want to come and pick you up. I said, fine. And of course, he's not told me I'm speaking, right? So I'm like, great, thank goodness for that. So he comes in, and around 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 7:05 is when the event starts in Denpasar. 6:10, he gets there. We are in his car, so we are just talking about Swami, and just a loving kind of, gentleman. And about around 6:40, we're getting close to, he says, by the way, there are 100 people who are going to show up, and you're speaking. So I'm like, God, you kind of, put me in a bind here, of course. Then, we talk about Swami, you are the one who is the narrator, you are the one who is the script writer and all of that. But at that moment, it's like, oh my God, help me. It's like, so of course, he helped me. So that was my first kind of baptism by fire in terms of trying to speak at a large Sai center, and happened to be overseas. But what I've also realized is that the will of God will never take you where the grace of God cannot protect you. So that's one thing that's always stayed with me. No matter how tough or what difficult situations one is put in, of our own doing, but God takes care. Now, talking about Swami, with him I have realized you have to expect the unexpected. So here is another anecdote. So 2009, or 2008, pardon me, we happened to go to Scottsdale, Arizona. So I had a continuing medical education talk that I was providing. Happened to take my parents with me at that time. So weekend we could go to the Grand Canyon is what we thought. Kind of, double up as a vacation as well. So we went there, did all the Grand Canyon stuff, and then we had one day before we caught the red-eye flight back to Charlotte. So we had one day, so I said, I'm very interested in art. And so I said, we really need to visit Old Town Scottsdale, which has these beautiful artists kind of, who clearly sell their products. And so we said, okay, instead of me driving, I said, let me kind of just hire a car service from the hotel and take off. So we all get to the lobby and kind of out in the driveway of the hotel. The car pulls up and we, get on board. So this gentleman had a very thick Middle Eastern accent, and he says, where are you all from? So we said, from India. He says, Bangalore? We said, yes. I'm like, and then he says, Sai Baba. I'm like, how can that be? It's like, we're just in Scottsdale, Arizona, and this gentleman doesn't seem like, an Indian. So he starts off to narrate that his wife, who is also from the same country as Mother Teresa, when she was a 5-year-old, she'd been having these dreams of this individual in orange robe and afro hair. And this dream continued throughout her life. And of course, she ends up going to India with a group of friends, like-minded people. And they all wanted to go on different kind of, places of pilgrimage in India. And one such place happens to be Puttaparthi. So that's when she recognizes this is the same person who's been appearing in my dreams. She gets an interview. Okay, this is the first kind of, effort of going to India and being in Parthi, and she gets an interview. So she's been there a couple of times since then. This lady happens to meet the gentleman who was driving us. They fall in love. He's from Iran. She's from Albania. They fall in love, and they get married against the wishes of their parents. So she is insistent that he go with her to Puttaparthi. So of course, he doesn't know about Swami. All that he's heard is from her. So he goes to Parthi. He's seated in Sai Kulwant Hall. He holds on to a piece of the Quran in his hand and is sitting. Swami comes, allows him to take Pada Namaskar, takes that piece of Quran from him and leaves. So that's his experience with Swami. So this gentleman is the one Swami chose to drive us around. So he is insistent we come to his house. Okay. So I tried to be kind of, as Swami says, if you cannot oblige, speak obligingly. So I tried to say kind of, it's going to be an imposition to your wife. It's like, we have to leave and we've got to come back to the hotel, take our stuff and, obviously take the red eye out. He said, you're going to be checking out of the hotel at 12 o'clock. Where are you going? I'll drop you off at the airport as well. So we said, fine. So we went to Old Town Scottsdale, took a look at some of these artists' colonies, and then we ended up getting a photo frame, because we normally carry pictures of Swami with us, got some incense sticks, and then we always carry vibhuti, right? So we said something that we can take for them. So we did that, checked out from the hotel, and we are driving, this gentleman is taking us to his home. So this is, for those of you who have been to Arizona, we are getting to Mesa area, and you get to the subdivision. It's a typical American subdivision. He gets into the driveway, he opens the door, and she's dressed in white salwar kameez with a vibhuti mark on the forehead and Sai bhajans in the backdrop. So we get there, and they have 2 dogs, no children, 2 dogs, Aditi and Shanti. So it happened to be a Sunday, so we said, lovely, we'll do bhajans here, right? We would do it at home, we are doing it here with them. So we got to do bhajans with them, and in the process, we also happened to exchange our birth dates with them. She asked, and hence we gave it to her. Fast forward to, so we it was a wonderful satsang that we had, and we ended up coming back to Colombia. It was my father's birthday. A day before his birthday, we got a large envelope by mail. Mom opened the envelope, and it was a beautiful picture of Swami in a yellow robe. It said, with love to my dad, from the husband and wife. It was such a wonderful gesture, them remembering and then giving Swami's, sending Swami's picture. So my mom called them up and said, just out of courtesy, thanking them for, such a wonderful gift. And she said, thank you so much. We just got the mail today. And she said, how did it get to you? I just mailed it by first class mail yesterday around 4 o'clock. And we had it by 12 o'clock, a day before the birthday. So again, Swami was the mailman. He just it was like speed post getting, or courier getting to us. So again, Swami is there in every form, right? And that connect always happens. Let me narrate here another experience, which probably has some relevance to the Atlanta Sai Center as well. So around same year, 2008, there was a lot of interest by the young adults to organize a mini retreat in Colombia, even though we don't have a Sai Center there. So we said we'll invite people from the Southeast, so Atlanta, we'll invite people from North Carolina, Raleigh, as well as from Anderson, as well as Greenville. So they said, would you be willing to ask Mohan Kullangod and Geeta Ram to come? Of course, I'd met Geeta Ram when I came to this country. Remember the Bethesda Bhajan? So I ended up having that connect made there. So I called them up, and both of them very lovingly agreed to come. This was just a one-day retreat. They came the previous day. And so we started off from my home. It was held at one of the Indian temples there. So we start off, and so I normally have, CDs playing in my car, right? Whether Sai Bhajan or, some other kind of kirtana that I normally have. So it happened to be Bhadrachala Ramadasa's Kritis, so in Telugu. So Geeta said, I love this. And Mohan said, I also love this. So we get to the temple. Now, Mohan was talking about Namasmarana. So in that Namasmarana, he talked about Gopanna. For those of you who know, Gopanna later on got to be called Bhadrachala Ramadasa. All the ordeals that he went through and the importance of Namasmarana and all of this. So again, there was a Bhadrachala Ramadasa connect. So we started off with the CD. Here was, Mohan talking about Bhadrachala Ramadasa as an exemplar of Namasmarana. And then in the evening, it so happened that there were a couple of kids who used to learn dance at the temple. Not a part of the Sai Center, but they learned dance from a dance teacher there. And they said they wanted to perform. So which is great, right? It's like, it's a cultural event. These children danced to the composition of Bhadrachala Ramadasa. Okay, you see a thread here, right? So we thought, okay, this went really well, and so it was a nice event. Next day, I got a phone call from some of the Sai brothers who had come from Atlanta. They had come for the event, and they said, I didn't tell them about all of these connects, but here is what they told me. They said, we were traveling from Columbia to Atlanta. We were listening to Sai bhajans on CD. There is this bhajan called Shri Raghunandana Dasharatanandana Bhadradishwara Rama, right? So one of the boys who was traveling with them liked that song very much. But every time they put the CD in, it would stop at Bhadradishwara Rama. It wouldn't move far beyond that. So they felt bad for this boy, and they said, we will sing the same song from Atlanta to Columbia. What are the odds of that, right? Again, that connect that God makes. So hence, Sarvada Sarvakaleshu Sarvatra Harichintanam. That will take us through anything that we are going through, good or bad. Then, of course, there have been numerous, I can be here for, hours together talking about it. I go to Denver, I'm an examiner for the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. I'm just walking through a strip mall next door to the hotel where I was staying. There is this beautiful, I was just doing window shopping. I see this beautiful mandalas hanging out there. I enter the shop, picture of Swami. This has happened another time. I was in Atlanta for a professional kind of meeting. So one of my friends happened to be the president of that professional organization. He said, why don't you come sit at my table? So after the event was over, we all got up to get our buffet dinners. Standing in line, I come back. By the time I get back, there's a gentleman sitting there, happened to be a Caucasian, sitting, and I did not know him. He was not there before. So there was somebody who introduced me to him and said, do you know each other? We said no. And so he said, where are you from? So I said, Bangalore. So I asked him, have you been to India? He said, yes, Puttaparthi. I'm like, no, can't be. It's like, I said, what do you mean? So he said, he visited Puttaparthi in the probably mid-70s. You remember Sai Gita? So Swami had a veterinarian for Sai Gita. So this gentleman happened to be friends of that family, the veterinarian. So they ended up visiting, and it so happened that I think it was Onam celebrations during the time that he visited. And for Swami had this Mauna Vratam, from what I draw. So they said, you can ask him whatever you want, and you can write it on a piece of paper and give it to him. So this gentleman comes and he writes whatever he wants and gives it to Swami. So I said, out of curiosity, what did you write, if you don't mind me asking? He said, Swami, give me what I deserve. Had it been me, I would have given a laundry list of things. Swami, give me this, this, and this. But this gentleman said, give me what I deserve. So here is what happened to him, the transformative journey of this gentleman. So he said, once he came back from India, he had turned to vegetarianism, given up meat completely. He had found a guru, and he had learned to play the mridangam. Amazing, right? There are so many people around us that Swami has played such an instrumental role. It's like everybody is special, right? That's how I look at life. Each one of us is special to him. So, as a neuroscientist, I've always been skeptical about miracles until you start experiencing it yourself. Then you get to be a believer. I've come to believe that where science ends, spirituality begins. So since I'm a physician, I also thought I should just talk about two incredible experiences I've had as a physician, and these are medical experiences. So in the year 2005, my dad happened to, so we were at somebody's house. It was a Sunday, happened to be a Sunday, and we were doing Sai Bhajans. My father happened to be with my sister in North Carolina. I switched off my phone, since during bhajans, no kind of interruption whatsoever. And so after we were done, we were driving back, I switched it on, and then my sister had frantically called several times. Happened to have a myocardial infarction, what you call as a heart attack. And so I had to rush back got back home, kind of, picked up a few clothes, and then we raced to North Carolina. Constantly chanting, kind of, Swami Gayatri, Sai Gayatri, as well as Gayatri. And we get to the hospital. And, so God works in mysterious ways. The gentleman, the cardiothoracic surgeon, who was supposed to be there that day, for whatever reason, had called in and had a covering physician. So this covering physician comes in. He was the physician who had done the maximum number of bypasses in the state of North Carolina. Okay? That gentleman was the one who consulted upon my dad. So of course, we had to make a decision. Do you want to go with the traditional treatment, which is medications, or do you want to go with a cardiac bypass? Difficult decision. Of course, even though my sister and I both are physicians, very often it's the oldest daughter who has to make those decisions. And so, of course, with a prayer to Swami, we went ahead with that option of the cardiac bypass surgery to be performed. So this gentleman, the cardiothoracic surgeon, also took a liking to me because his father was a psychiatrist. So we just hit it off. Again, how stars get aligned that way? Only he can make it happen. On the day of the surgery, he sits with our family, holding hands and praying. How often does that happen? Right? Not very often. Then, of course, I have a picture of Swami which says, "Why fear when I am here?" Right? You all remember that picture, right? It's an Abhaya Hasta picture, Swami, and it's I'd kept it in a plastic jacket so that it doesn't get soiled. So I just held on to that and kept praying. It was Hanuman Chalisa and Gayatri throughout the procedure. They would come and give us here is progress made, here is where we are doing next. And then, of course, next 24 hours, it's we'll try to wait and see what happens. The next morning, so this is 24 hours later, he was intubated and had to be extubated after that. I take that picture, which I had been praying, from his Abhaya Hasta, a spray of vibhuti. So obviously he was telling me that he is there. Why fear when I am here? We just read it and then forget about it, right? But then I'm there for you. I'm there for you. I'm there to take care of him. Why are you worried? So that was one experience. There are so many such, but I'll narrate another experience more recently, 2019. So we were in India at the end of the year, and we had, I think we had performed some Sudarshana Homa at one of the temples in India soon after we reached there. And then subsequent to that, my mom's health started to deteriorate. She's getting to be short of breath. So I'm like, as a physician, I keep a finger on the pulse, not trying to keep everybody calm, that's important. Day 2, we had to visit certain families. We did that, and by the late evening, the second day, things started to get kind of worse. So I said, okay, I'll sleep next to you just to monitor you. And in the middle of the night, she woke up with just gasping for breath. So I was like, what do I do now? I've got to wake somebody up. So I've never used healthcare services in India since I completed my medical schooling a long, long time ago. So I had to wake my cousin up and said, we need to take her to the hospital. So again, not knowing which hospital they were going to take her to. So we get in their car. He's driving. Right in front of the car is an auto rickshaw going with Shirdi Sai with his blessing hand. I was like, okay, well, you are in charge. You're going to guide me where we are going. So, of course, get to the hospital. Again, knowing the emergency rooms in the US, they are extremely busy, right? And you're talking about India, 1.35 billion lives. It's going to be busy too out there. So we get to the hospital, not a single person in the ED, not a single soul in the ED. So the doctor was sleeping. So I had to be woken up. Obviously, if there are no patients, he may as well rest. So woke him up and kind of he checked her pulse ox was pretty low. Said, need to move her to the ICU. So I said, fine, kind of again, constantly praying to Swami, got her to the ICU. They said, you won't be able to go into the ICU. You can sit outside. There is a counseling room outside. I'm a psychiatrist. God had provision for me to sit in that counseling room right adjacent to the ICU. Sat there, kept chanting his name. And then around about an hour after she was assessed, I get called in. So ICUs, normally they wear masks, right? So this gentleman, I'm standing at the foot end of the bed, and here is this gentleman standing, and the doctor, pulmonary critical care guy. And he's talking he's kind of, asking about the history, and I'm telling him, and I was like, and it so happened that day I was supposed to leave for Prashanti Nilayam. I normally spend like about 10 days in Prashanti Nilayam every year. So I just said, today I was supposed to be leaving for Prashanti Nilayam. So I'm kind of, trying to, and I can't see his expression. I can just see his eyes. He looks at me and says, I serve at super specialty. I was like, oh my God. He said, normally, this time of the year, I'm always in Prashanti Nilayam because New Year's Eve through New Year, I'm there. But this year, I decided to go on January 4th. He was there to take care of her. And then it doesn't end here. So he had scrubs on. He kind of, from within, he pulls out a pendant. Swami materialized this for me. Okay? My mom, who was kind of there, she was like, sigh of relief. It was like she said, Sai Ram. So it was as if he had come in the form of this doctor, and he was there guiding us. And it was just, despite kind of what we had to go through, he was there every step of the way. I mean, every physician that we encountered was just a phenomenal kind of, team of providers who were just kind of, very helpful, very loving, and took care of her. So now, when we sing these bhajans, right, got to appreciate every word in that bhajan. Sai bhajan bina sukha shanti nahi, hari naam bina anand nahi. So we learn to appreciate what that really means, right? The importance of God's name, the importance of God's bhajans in our lives. Now, each one of us who's sitting here and those of us who are not here, who didn't join us, all of us are on a spiritual path, whether we like it or not. Now, when we are on a spiritual path, we normally go through a cleansing process, right? External cleansing, we all take a shower every day. Internal cleansing, the soap and water that you use is namasmarana. And to me, it's like I cannot belabor the importance of namasmarana that Swami has talked about so many times. And there are such great examples throughout history, especially kind of, it came to light during COVID. I'll narrate a couple of those experiences. So one is kind of going back to in history is the story of Sakubai. For those of you who know, she's a saint from Maharashtra. She had a very tough life, kind of, poverty-stricken, yet she never forgot the name of Panduranga, right? Pandarpur, Vithala. So she was very well known for her namasmarana, constantly chanting Rangaranga Panduranga. Whatever she did, whether she was, cooking, whether she was kind of, trying to make cow dung cakes, whatever it is, she always would chant Rangaranga Panduranga. Around the same time, there were contemporary saints. Jnanadeva and Vamadeva were brothers. Vamadeva later got to be Namadeva. He was called Namadeva later, and I'll get to that in a second. So this Vamadeva ends up coming to the village that Sakuba is from, because he has heard so much about her. Steadfast faith in God, just by chanting the name of the Lord. So he comes to her, they have this long kind of, discourse and dialogue with each other. And so she says, I mean, she is, of course, just a villager, a common man, a common villager. So she says, I'd make these cow dung cakes, which is eco-friendly fuel for kids who clearly kind of are interested. So, and they have to dry it, right? Dry it outside your homes. So she says, when I do that, I think somebody has been stealing my cow dung cakes. I mean, of course, they dry it in a common area. So it could be your cakes, your neighbor's cakes, everybody's cakes are kind of let there to dry. So Vamadeva says, how do you know it's your cakes that are being stolen? Good question, right? She goes in and brings one of the cakes that she has made, a dried cake. And she says, kind of, listen to this. He takes that cake, puts it close to his ears. From the cake resonates Ranga Ranga Panduranga. Even an inanimate object can imbibe the name of the Lord. What a beautiful story, isn't it? So then Vamadeva realizes the importance of Namasmarana. Hence he got to be called Namadeva much, much later, because he was the one who kind of, propagated that. During COVID, kind of coming back to that, it's been a panacea, just kind of chanting the name of the Lord. Man me ram, hath me kam. For us in healthcare, we've had to go full stream, 200%. We have not rested. And the only thing that has taken us, kind of brought us this far, is just doing that, kind of just contemplating on the name of the Lord. And difficulties are a part and parcel of everyone's life, right? We all know that. Going back to Treta Yuga, even when Sita was abducted by Ravana, right, put in the Ashokavana, she had to the demonesses, the atrocities that they committed on her, psychological, emotional trauma that she had to endure. Around that time, she really wants to give up on life. And so what she does is her long braided kind of hair, tresses, she tries to kind of hang herself from a tree. It's right on that tree is where Hanuman is seated. So when he starts to chant Ramanama, so all the despair and the hopelessness and the suicidality that Sita is going through, complete turnaround when she hears Ramanama. Instills hope in her. Hence the song, Sita Mata Shoka Vinasha Anatha Natha Namo Namo Marutiraya Mahanubhava Ati Balavanta Namo Namo Viranjaneya Namo Namo. Now let's go to Bhakti Era saints. Meera, right? What she had to go through. Ardent devotee of Lord Krishna, right? But she had to be tortured too. Her in-laws, brother-in-law, to the extent of even putting poison in her milk. So she had the habit of offering everything to the Lord before she consumes it. And hence the importance of Brahmarpanam. Very important. So when she does that, it's like it turns into Amrit, right? Rana ne vish diya mano amrit piya dukh laakho sahe muse govind kahe wo to gali gali hari gun gaane lagi. So again, we have we have examples throughout history. What COVID also did for very many of us is also kind of allowed us to kind of look at death in its face. Whether it was family members, whether it was friends who ended up losing their lives, or even our own kind of fears about death. Around, I think, another saint from Sadashiva Brahmendra, who's written some beautiful compositions. He again was a very strong proponent of Namasmarana, constantly he was always in ecstasy, chanting the name of the Lord. And once as he's walking, chanting the name of the Lord, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, kind of in that ecstasy of kind of just exuberance of kind of chanting the name of the Lord. Somebody chops off his hand, doesn't even realize it's just dangling, and so there's someone else who kind of sees him with his hand almost chopped, with blood oozing, and they say, "Hey, somebody's chopped off your hand." All that he does, chants the name of the Lord, fixes it back up, and lo and behold, it's as good as new. So Sadashiva Brahmendra was the one who talks about importance of Ramanama, because it clearly encapsulates the essence of the Vedas and every scripture. So he says, Janana Marana Bhaya Shoka Viduram Sakala Shastra Nigamagamasaram Pibare Ramarasam Rasane Pibare Ramarasam Pibare Ramarasam. And Swami kind of loves singing this song, as many of you have heard. And that, again, we've got to do it, trying to make sure that we incorporate this into our lives. Now, I think kind of, we've talked a lot about the importance of Namasmarana. Let me kind of talk about one other easy thing that we can do, which we are doing here today, satsang, right? Despite COVID, you all continue to do those virtual satsangs. And that's important. Congregation of like-minded people kind of getting together. That, I think, is extremely important, especially because, coming from a psychiatrist, the mind, right? Mind can oscillate between good and bad constantly. Happiness and sorrow. Swami, I love Swami's analogies. He talks about the human mind is like a housefly, right? Once it's nibbling on sacred prasadam, and the other moment it's nibbling on something in the garbage trash can. So again, the human mind is like that, constantly oscillating between good and bad. And that's where satsang truly helps in terms of that one-pointedness that we all need to have. And remember, even when you look at the Kurukshetra war, right? The essence of Krishna being the psychotherapist for Arjuna, right? Bhagavad Gita. And what was Krishna? He was able to steady his mind, even though he was his Sarathi. So to me, what is most important for each one of us is to have the Lord as the eternal charioteer to guide our minds. Hence the song, Sanatana Sarathi Saisha Sarvottama Gunanidhe Paramesha. So I think it's important to, again, keep doing that, right? Anytime we are distracted by things, try to pivot back to Swami. Swami has very often in his discourses quoted the importance of satsang. Talks about satsangatve nissangatvam, nissangatve nirmohatvam, nirmohatve nischalatatvam, nischalatatve jivan mukti. So what does he say here? He says, from good company comes non-attachment. Non-attachment then results in freedom from delusion, maya, right? That's what we are surrounded by, which then leads to the changeless truth, and that in turn bestows liberation. And that's our ultimate goal, being on the spiritual path, is liberation. So I think for very many of us, it's a great blessing to be born during this avatarhood of Sri Satya Sai, wherein God has made it so simple for each one of us, right? We don't have to be an erudite scholar to learn all of this. He's simplified it to such an extent that any one of us can understand. Swami says, man should always pay attention to ahara and vihara. Okay, vihara are habits. Right? Habits die hard, especially bad habits, they drive really hard. So, and of course, ahara is what you eat. Here I'm reminded of something that Swami says, which I've always used in very many of my talks. Food that you eat affects your mind. As is the food, so are your thoughts. As are your thoughts, so, as is your food, so is your mind. As is your mind, so are your thoughts. As are your thoughts, so is your conduct. As is your conduct, so is your health. Boils down to health. Important, right? So to me, when he says this, the food that we eat affects our mind, he's not talking about just the food that we ingest. He's talking about the panchendriyas, right? What we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we smell, what we feel on our skin. We experienced all of it during COVID. News cycles, constant bombardment, right? And we always wanted to be either hooked on to our iPhones, our iPads, or the television, constantly. And that played havoc on all of our minds, didn't it? And social media is another platform. So again, the things that we smell, if you smell something obnoxious, that is going to have an impact on how you think. There's this beautiful story from Ramayana, wherein as they're going through Dandakaranya forest, it's Rama, Lakshmana and Sita. They were, as you know, Dandakaranya was ruled by Khara and Dushana, relatives of Ravana. So as they're walking through the forest, Lakshmana for a few minutes has this thought. He says, I left all the palatial and royal comforts to come serve you. Unlike Lakshmana, right, who is so devoted and loyal to his brother. And here he is making these statements. Rama doesn't say anything. And once they leave Dandakaranya, get to Chitrakuta, Lakshmana realizes his folly. He knows the environment was the one that let him think that way. So again, going back to food that you eat affects your mind. Very important to realize. I think, while we've encountered a lot of kind of heartbreaking, traumatic things during COVID-19, we also have realized that we really need to start focusing inward, Godward, right? He is the only anchor, the only foundation. Jeevan aadhar sai, janam janam bandhu sai. As long as we remember that. Now, another tool that Swami has provided for cleansing of the mind is Gayatri mantra. Right? So we all chant Gayatri. So Gayatri is so potent. Sarva Roga Nivarana Gayatri. So it's like, it clearly takes care of all the diseases, relieves all diseases. Sarva Dukkha Pariharani Gayatri. So all sorrows kind of alleviates that. Sarva Vancha Falashri Gayatri. So bestower of all your wishes and all your desires. So one mantra that can give you everything in life. So chanting it whenever you can, wherever you can, is going to be extremely beneficial. If the mantra is chanted, various kinds of powers will emerge. So I think everything that Swami says is so profound, so potent. So we've just got to start to pay attention to each one of those. To me, I think he's been the greatest role model. When we are faced with difficulties in life, difficult decisions, ethical dilemmas, he's always said, you've got to uphold morality and ethics. Very important, no matter how difficult the decision. Truth and universal compassion. I was talking a few years ago to Brother Jean Massey. As you know, he's done some beautiful documentaries. And he was talking about when he interviewed these folks from a tribal village in India, wherein the government had not reached, no electricity, but Swami's love had reached. They had experienced miracles. So isn't that amazing, what Swami's love has done to people? Swami says, miracles are my visiting cards, right? But let's pause for a second and see. Every day is a miracle, right? Each of our hearts beating 100,000 times in 24 hours is a miracle in itself. The breaths that we take, 22,000 breaths in a 24-hour time span is a miracle in itself. I think we are so fortunate to be born in this Kali Yuga with Swami as as a contemporary, and having Swami's sambhashan, sparshan, as well as darshan throughout our lives for very many of us. To me, what began as that sneak peek of Swami through that picture that my father's friend had given us, each one of you would have different experiences. That was the one that instilled in me that sweetness of divinity. So it's like a seed that's been sown, but then you've got to water it as a spiritual aspirant. So the rest of it kind of, rests on us in terms of what we want to do. Now, for me and my family in this Janma, the greatest blessing has been kind of the entry of Swami into our lives, or as we recognize it. Several lessons learned along the way, and it's been a transformative journey. He has taught me that, instilling basic human values in life is so very important for me as a professional, as a physician, when I serve my patients, but also for me on this path of bhakti and seva, to be a better human being. At the end of the day, that's what matters, not what I do as a professional. In addition, as a psychiatrist, I have learned that the importance of the mind-body-spirit connectivity, right? That's so very important. COVID really taught us all of that. If you look at the mind, body, and spirit, I like to kind of take a look at it as the three surfaces of a prism. Okay? Each one of those surfaces need to be in equilibrium. When you have it in equilibrium, you have good health. If it's in disequilibrium, you have disease, not being at ease, dis-ease, right? If you allow Swami's love to shine through that prism, your life will be sanctified with that rainbow of colors. And that's an important thing for each one of us to realize. I think what we need to kind of pray for is pray to him for his divine love. Very often when we pray, we ask for tinsel treasures, right? What we need to be asking for is God himself. When it's him, you get everything else just follows. I often kind of, when we talk about Swami, I see him as this Akshaya Patra, limitless. It's like a limitless credit card. He's like the MasterCard, right? I'll end by kind of, with these words that to me and to all of us here, I think our heartfelt gratitude to Swami, who is the source of love, who's showered us with so much of grace and blessing. I'll end with two lines of this particular song. सारे संसार का प्यार मैंने तुझी में पाया, तू मिले दिल खिले और जीने को क्या चाहिए, तू मिले दिल खिले और जीने को क्या चाहिए. Happy birthday, Swami, and thank you. I bow to the divinity in all of you.
Saidam, everyone. Again, a heartfelt thank you to Dr. Meera Narasimha for such a sweet talk, referencing so many stories, and really weaving in what our society has been feeling and thinking and going through for the past 24 months at the ending, and kind of honing in on all the lessons that we've really gained from everything we've been experiencing and that cleansing we've been going through. So I thank you for that. A small token of our appreciation from our center. Brother Ravi, are we following the same agenda, or are we going to move to the children's program? I just want to be sensitive to time.
I think we'll follow the same agenda. Sairam. I was wondering as the talk was going on whether, we can have a follow-up session tomorrow just for her singing, isn't it? Sister, thank you so much for taking time. I know she was wondering whether it's supposed to be virtual or in person. I unfortunately insisted that it is in person. Thank you so much for coming. And it so happened that my memory goes back to uh, our conversation. It so happened that we ran into each other in Shanti Bhavan in Prashanti Nilayam, and that was for 90th birthday, right? Right after she spoke in Prashanti Nilayam for Ladies' Day celebration, and today you are in his own Prashanti Nilayam in Atlanta. Thank you so much for coming, Sai Ram. And also so happened that auntie at home, I saw some text, ladies exchanging green color, so on. I thought, okay, auntie somehow miraculously picked up green. But after, when when Sister Meera was talking, it so happened that she was part of the altar itself today. So wonderful. Of course, grateful to Swami. So, dear all, apologies for the delay. But what we'll do, even for the folks on YouTube, we'll take a short 15-20 minute break. We don't want to, eat up YouTube space, so we'll cut down the streaming now. But in 15 minutes, we'll get back and get to our, next set of offerings, where SSC children's offering coming up and a short young adults a video clip coming up, and followed by a special Jula that is arranged, and we'll have a Jula program today. So all of you stay back, have a quick break, and the chai, coffee, and snacks are available. But if we all want to go back quickly, right, in time, we have to make it quick. Jai Sai Ram. Thank you. That's okay. Initially, the second or third, right? I'm using it for output from the laptop. Children are singing. Huh? Are they singing? Children are not singing. They have some video composition. Huh? Yawning. I don't know. Cyprus is coming or not. Chalo, we'll see. Yeah, you're good. Okay, check harmonium also once.